Hey, Beauty. In this episode, I'm talking about 4 lessons that we can learn from Joseph in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. It's just a reminder of how good God is in the midst of everything, including trials. Before we get into the show, I just want to remind you of my free guide for you. It's called Hope for Your Health: 4 simple, holistic steps to overcome autoimmunity for Christian women. So if you're interested, go to herholistichealing.com/free. It is a great guide that you can look over, and if you even implement 1 or 2 things, I believe that it can transform your health. So if you're interested in that free guide, go to herholistichealing.com/free. With all that being said, let's get into the show. Welcome to Her Holistic Healing. Do you want more energy and less anxiety so that you can do all the things? Are you searching for meal ideas, essential oils, and other holistic treatments? Do you wish you could know which direction to take with your health so that you could finally feel better? Hey, I'm Alexandra. I love Jesus. I'm a wife, mom of 3, and registered nurse with years of experience in clinical research. I also wanted more energy so that I could have more fun and keep up with my growing child. I too was confused about all the different diet and treatment options. I too wanted to wake up every day and feel good, but I felt anxious because I couldn't solve the mystery of my health. Until God showed me that He is the source of true healing. In this podcast, you will learn holistic treatments and Bible truths that will lead you to the peace, joy, and freedom that you have been hoping for. So what do you say we take a break from the mind-numbing humdrum busyness? Let's rest and let God be our healer and helper. Who do we serve? We serve the living God, Joshua 3:10. My helper, Psalm 54:4. The Most High God, Daniel 3:26. The faithful God, Deuteronomy 7:9. God at hand, Jeremiah 23:23. God of seeing, Genesis 16:13. The Lord mighty in battle, Psalm 24:8. Provider, Genesis 22:14. My rock, my fortress, my deliverer, my stronghold, Psalm 18:2. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Isaiah 9:6. I am, Exodus 3:14. This list could go on for a very long time. I was listening to this podcast and the host was talking about how it is kind of hard for small businesses right now because of the economy. And the guest on her show spoke up and she said that we don't operate by the world's economy. We operate by God's economy. In other words, even if the rest of the world is struggling with money or struggling with something, it doesn't matter because God's on our side, because God can do anything. I thought that was so beautiful because I believe that this is true as well. And the same thing goes for our health. So many times we get stressed out by a diagnosis that we receive from our doctor. I'll always remember a question that my pathophysiology teacher asked when I was in nursing school. He said, "Have you had your cancer today?" He said that because our world is full of toxins and we are bombarded with carcinogens every single day. The truth is, we could walk outside our door and get hit by a car, right? That could happen every single day. The truth is that we could have diseases that we don't know about. And maybe we don't know about them because our doctor didn't test us for it. We might have gone to the doctor and the doctor hasn't tested us for that particular disease because a test hasn't even been created yet to detect it. maybe we have something that science doesn't even have a name for yet. It could be that we know that something is wrong with us, but the doctor doesn't know what to test for. So, as I've said in a lot of episodes, he just brushes you off and says, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you. I tested you for everything." In all of these scenarios, that's why it's the best thing to always go to God for healing first and ask God for wisdom first. This is the whole reason why I wrote my book, Discover God's Health Wisdom, because in our culture, a lot of times, we run to the doctor first without going to God first. So instead of believing that the doctor has all the answers, I want to encourage you to go to God for healing first, ask God for wisdom first, and trust Him with the outcome with a childlike faith. And this is a reminder to myself as well. I've just been telling myself over and over for the past maybe month or so when something goes away that I don't want it to go, I just keep telling myself, I trust God. I trust God. So I go to God first. I follow His instructions. I take action if He tells me to take action, or sometimes I'm not sure what to do, but I take action because, in general, I believe that in order for God to direct our steps, we have to be on a certain path. So we have to be in movement doing something most of the time. So after I go to God and take action as needed, I just have to keep going back to the same thing over and over again. I have to say to myself, I trust God. I trust God. I trust God. And it actually helps. It helps for me to remind myself to trust God, to remind myself that if He wanted me out of a certain situation, I've prayed for it. If He wanted me out of it, then He would take me out. If I'm still in it, He wants me to be in it. So I am going to trust God. And I'm not necessarily talking about health issues right now in this episode. I'm talking about a variety of things, but this can apply to our health as well. I was listening to this other podcast episode where the host was talking about how an experiment was done with professional basketball players. One group of one group of players, they were practicing their free throws. That was one group. Another group didn't actually physically practice their free throws. They just imagined themselves making free throws over and over again. And the third group did nothing. When the study was over, they discovered that the people that physically practiced their free throws made more of their free throws afterwards, but people that imagined themselves making free throws almost improved as much as the people who physically practiced their free throws. And of course, the people that didn't do anything, they saw no improvement in their free throws. But isn't that amazing? It just goes to show you how amazing our brain is. I believe that's why the Bible says to take every thought captive. Think about things that are good. It's good to fill our brain with good things. Imagine good things. When it comes to our health, I believe that we have a lot more power over our health than what the media will have us believe. But regardless of what's going on with your health or anything else in your life right now, I just want to encourage you to trust God. As I was preparing for this episode, I thought about Joseph. Remember Joseph in the Bible in Genesis? When he was 17 years old, he started having dreams that people would be bowing down to him. Before that dream came true, he was sold as a slave by his brothers. He was falsely accused. He was put in prison. It wasn't until he was 30 years old that he was second in command to Pharaoh. The story is so amazing. When I was thinking about it, I was going to take a totally different angle with this podcast episode, but when I read it over again, I started to see some new things. So, Genesis chapter 39, we see that Joseph, when he was sold, he was actually sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian. Genesis chapter 9, verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. So, yes, it was traumatic and unfair that Joseph was sold as a slave by his brothers. But as I was looking at the story again, it's just so beautiful that Joseph was starting to become a successful man. He was, first of all, not just sold to anyone, but he was sold to the captain of the guard, an Egyptian. And this Egyptian put him in charge of basically everything in his house. So Joseph was gaining management skills while in this man's house. Then, of course, he was falsely accused and he was put into prison. So let's see. Genesis chapter 39, starting in verse 20. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. The Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. So again, when I was thinking of this story, I was thinking how tragic and unfair it was for Joseph to be put in prison, but as I was reading this today, that's amazing that Joseph once again was put in charge. God gave him success, he gave him favor while he was in prison. And if Joseph had not been in the prison, he would not have met the people in prison. He wouldn't have interpreted the dreams. What happened in that prison eventually led him to being Pharaoh's second in command, which made his dream come true of people bowing down to him. Because Joseph was made Pharaoh's second in command, he is able to save Joseph's whole family from the famine. His relationship with his brothers is restored. Joseph is reunited with his brothers and his father, and there's forgiveness, there's restoration. Genesis 45, starting in verse 4. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near. And he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children, and your children's children, and your flocks, your herds, and all that you have.' There I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty. And now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father of all my honor in Egypt and of all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck, and he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. After that, his brothers talked with him. So, after rereading this story of Joseph, I don't know if you remember the musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I went to see that musical. And I used to listen to the CD. I don't know if the musical depicted everything in Joseph's story really well or not, but just reading the story today, it just helps me to see how good God is. When I was thinking about the story of Joseph, I was just remembering how tragic the story was, but I can see so much beauty in his story and how God was with him through it all, and he gave him favor even in the darkest places. So, just to summarize, I think there are 4 points that we can learn from the story of Joseph. There's actually a ton of things that we can learn, but here are 4 things that I pulled out today when I read this story. Number one, God has his own timing. When Joseph had the dream, the he had a couple dreams that he would bow down to him. He was 17 years old when he had those dreams. I think it was about 17. And then he was, I believe, 30 years old when those dreams came true. So it took 13 years for those dreams to come true. So God has his own timing. Number two, God uses difficulty for growth. Joseph was sold as a slave, but as we read, he was sold to Potiphar and he was given favor. He was put in charge of basically Potiphar's whole household. He was falsely accused and then he was put in prison, but once again, he was put in charge of basically the whole prison. So through his trials, he was growing as a leader. He was growing, it seems like he was growing in integrity, and God was giving him favor, which brings me to my next point. God is always with us. Also, Joseph, when he was falsely accused, he was basically Potiphar's wife was throwing herself at Joseph, right? But he didn't take advantage of her. He didn't do anything wrong in the situation. He ran away from the temptation. And I believe that God kept giving him favor because he was a man of integrity. At least as he was getting older, it looked like he was a man of integrity. I'm not sure that he was when he was a boy. I'm not sure how to interpret what happened when he was a boy, but when he was older, we could see that he had a lot of integrity and God was always with him and he gave him favor with Potiphar, he gave him favor in the prison, and of course, he ended up as Pharaoh's second in command. Lesson number 4, God will eventually use heartache for good. Joseph was sold as a slave. He was falsely accused. He was put in prison. But God used that time to grow Joseph as a person. He used the whole situation with his brothers. He brought restoration and he showed Joseph's brothers what forgiveness looks like because Joseph forgave them. And because of Joseph's position, he was able to save his whole family from the famine. So prior to reading the story of Joseph, again, I was thinking about the fact that it was so ridiculous that Joseph was put into prison, and I was wondering if Joseph thought to himself, God, why am I here? Don't I have a bigger purpose than this? Don't you have something bigger, something better, something more comfortable for me than being in this prison. But as I look at this passage, I see that Joseph did so many good things. Even when he was in prison, he was put in charge of the people in the prison. He helped other prisoners interpret their dreams. I'm sure he did other things for them too. So this is just a reminder to me and to you when we're in situations where we wonder and we're kind of complaining to God, or we're just growing so weary of our situations, whatever they are, we can remember Joseph and see how God was there for Joseph, how he showed him favor, how he was growing Joseph while he was in prison through every hardship that he experienced. There was a reason for it. The truth is that we may never know why we suffer right now. We don't understand what we're going through. We don't understand that we've asked God for things. We've asked God even for little things, even for a little relief. And it seems like we're not getting that. The truth is, though, that God is always working even when we can't see it. There are days when we just have to go back to saying, I trust God. I trust God. The same God who allowed Joseph to be sold as a slave, the same God who allowed Joseph to be falsely accused and to be put into prison. It's also the same God who elevated Joseph to almost the highest position in the land. It's the same God who saved Jacob's family from the famine. It's the same God who restored the relationship that Joseph had with his brothers. The truth is that we serve a God of miracles. Whether we see it or not, whether we're having a good day or a bad day, whether we feel it or not, whether we're in pain, whether we're feeling joyful, whether we're feeling weary, let's remember Romans 8:28. I think this is basically my verse of the year. It says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." We might not see it right now, but God is working all things together for good, for those who love God, for those who are called according to his purpose. Thanks for listening today. If you liked what you heard, will you leave me a review on Apple Podcasts? And if you want to connect with me, join me in my free community. The link is in the show notes, or go to herholistichealing.com. Matthew 11. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls.
For you, it's easy and my burden is light.